Welcome to Million Dollar Grit, the podcast that dives deep into the world of entrepreneurship where tenacity meets strategy and dreams meet reality. My name is Julie, and I explore the raw, often overlooked truths of what it takes to succeed in business and in life. It's not just about the glossy success stories, it's about the grit it takes to get there. All right. Hey, welcome back to Million Dollar Grit. There is a reason that I did not get a podcast out at the beginning of the week, and I want to talk about it. So we are neck deep in Launch Gorgeous, which is our twice a year coaching experience. We do it live. We take anywhere from 100 to 200 students through launching a particular funnel. So this time we're doing the live webinar funnel. And the most intense part of the experience for me personally is the offer, which is usually right at the beginning. And that's because I want to make sure everyone has a really solid offer that they can work with, because offer is one of the key reasons that a funnel will succeed or fail. So this is a weird season we are in economically, politically. And so course and consulting and all of this is down across the board. So it's not just you. You're not some special snowflake who the world is falling apart for. Like, everybody is sort of on their heels. And these are big names and little names both. And that is verified. So I'm not just guessing. I know this to be true. So I wanted to be really as comprehensive as I could be as a coach when I was working with all of these students. So we went through the training, and so here's how it went. First, we did a 1-hour training, and I gave everyone explicit homework to do. It was basically an offer brief with a bunch of other things added. So there were about 8 pieces they needed for their offer. They needed a brief, they needed a stack, an outline, they needed a logo, a name, a price, and just generally what that container was. So I provided a GPT to assist with some of this, and then I did about 4 hours of just straight Q&A. I knew a lot of people were going to have questions working through their homework, and then I graded every single offer brief using a rubric that they knew about. I used a GPT to assist, so I did about 84, I would say. Yeah, 84, and so I think there was 150 students, so over 50% of the student base submitted, which was amazing. But it was a lot of work. And then I did another 4 hours of feedback on the homework as I was grading to help sort of streamline and make sure that there were guardrails for people who were kind of going off track. So that is what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. It's been incredibly intense, very rewarding. And the advantage that I have by doing this, even though it's a ton of work and takes a ton of time, is that I can see patterns, right? And now with AI, I can see patterns even more clearly. And these patterns are so predictable that I can now teach on a podcast and say, hey, this pattern is so predictable and is so statistically significant that the chance that you're going to do this too when you create your offer is quite high. So I'm geeking out on the ability that I have to take all of this coaching and teaching and curate it down into patterns. And it's one of the reasons why I love to coach, and why, as much as it takes up a lot of time, I don't think I'm ever going to quit, because it keeps me in the game. So here are the biggest takeaways from the bajillion hours of offer coaching that I did over the past 2 weeks. So the problem. So many people get off track on their offer brief because they have not clearly defined the problem that they solve. And so if you are finding that you're not sure about price, you're not sure about your outline, you're not sure about your name, all of those things hinge on how well you defined the problem. And a lot of people can't speak in problem language. They speak in solution language, right? So if I talk to someone and I say, hey, what's the problem you solve? And they say, well, the problem I solve is I help parents, with newborns, teach them how to sleep through the night. You immediately are leading with the solution, which is fine. It's not that that's a bad thing, but if you haven't really fully defined the problem, you can get off track in the offer creation process. So I kick back and I say, what's the problem though? And then they stop and they go, oh, well, the problem is the baby is not sleeping through the night. And I say, okay, that's the problem. Are you sure? And they'll say, well, the mother isn't sleeping. And I'm like, okay, so is this a course where you're teaching mothers how to fall back asleep because they get woken up a million times? Are you teaching co-sleeping so that they can nurse and sort of be in a twilight? Are you teaching sleep training so that the baby can fall asleep? And then they look at me and realize, oh, and I'm like, that's why the problem is so important, because usually when you speak, you're being too vague and too general. And so in this example, the client might kick back to me and say, well, I'm teaching sleep training, right? I'm not focused on co-sleeping. I'm not focused on sleep hygiene for the mom. I'm focused on baby sleep training. And that's very different, right? So then that's super like crystal clear. Now we have a problem. And so now everything, the outline, the name, everything can flow out of that. It also allows you to go to the marketplace with more specificity, right? So if someone is looking for how to co-sleep with a baby, or how to like have better sleep hygiene after your newborn is waking you, or how to stop nursing at night or whatever, those are all different issues besides sleep training a newborn, right? And so that is just so important. And a lot of folks, when they submitted their offer brief, they created long paragraphs about the problem. And while that may feel good because it explains the problem deeply, it actually dilutes that laser focus, right? And nothing can be memorable, nothing can be referable if it is like a therapy intake form, right? It has to be something that can carry across the airwaves. And so that is why the problem is so important. And I knew that the problem was important, but this just reinforced that because so many people really, really didn't get this part right. The second issue with the problem was there were people who were able to like narrow it down to a sentence, which is one of the ideas of like, okay, now it's clear. But the problem was too general and too vague, right? And that creates a lot of issues as you go down the offer brief, because now it's like you're trying to set up a country with no borders, or no boundaries. You have no idea like where your line of responsibility begins and ends. And it's sort of like pulling a string on a ball of yarn. Like you could go in a million directions. And not only that, it reduces your ability to be competitive in the market. So that is probably the single best advice I can give you, is that if your problem is too general, too vague, too wordy, too deep, spoken like the solution, not specific, you are going to struggle. Okay, the second thing I want to convey is that big ideas, which are sort of these hooks, we sometimes call them hooks, we sometimes call them micro angles. They aren't smart, they're sticky. Okay, so a big idea is sort of a new way of thinking, and the solution is also that new way of thinking. So these are two sides of the same coin. So we asked people to come up with a big idea and a solution. And so if you imagine a coin with heads and tails, heads is the big idea, tails is the solution. It is the same idea crystallized differently. So a big idea, the head side, is something that's very sticky. So I think about like something that you'd want to wear on a t-shirt, right? I kind of called it the t-shirt test. Like if your big idea doesn't like fit on a shirt, it's probably not a big idea. And I was reading on social media, this guy, he started a newsletter called Only Dads. And it's sort of a play on OnlyFans, but it's all dad jokes, and dad jokes, like there's a lot out there for dads. Like it's a pretty competitive space, but he, I don't know, got something like 150,000 subscribers in like 3 days, right? Because the idea was sticky. Okay. It wasn't necessarily smart. It certainly didn't explain the whole concept, but it was sticky enough that it traveled, right? And so the head side of the coin is your philosophy, your solution, rendered sticky for the market. The tail side of the coin, the solution side, is the philosophy, right? It is the, it is the thing that you believe about the problem that changes everything, right? And so in one of our courses at Funnel Gorgeous, we have a course called Scalable Coach Method. The big idea is scale your one-to-one. Now, that's not super amazing for a t-shirt, but it's disruptive. Why? Because most people think you can't scale one-on-one. They think you have to turn it into a group program or a course. And I'm like, nope, scale your one-on-one. And so it immediately pricks curiosity for my ideal customer. My ideal customer is a coach who's burned out on one-on-one and wants to scale, but thinks they have to give up their one-on-one. The solution, which is the other side of the coin, is I say, hey, you can scale your one-on-one with flexible voice coaching. I can teach you how. It's just enough that they kind of understand what I mean by saying flexible voice coaching, but they don't really know it deeply enough that they can just oh, okay, I can do that and walk away, right? They have to then lean into me and say, okay, well, what is this? How does this actually work, right? So the solution is a philosophy, not a process. And a big idea is sticky, not smart. And they are two sides of the same coin. And I told all the students that you don't really need a bestseller, prize-winning big idea or solution in order to sell your product. It's great when it happens, but oftentimes people kind of hobble along with a half-baked one, and maybe it sort of crystallizes later. And that's fine. And that's actually pretty typical if you're turning around an idea that you don't have tons of data on. It's usually once you've had 10,000 hours and a bajillion clients that you can sort of distill it down into patterns, right? It's not the end of the world if you can't get your big idea or your solution completely dialed in. It is a very big problem if you cannot get your problem dialed in, okay? All right. The next thing that I noticed was that people didn't understand the offer stack. And the offer stack is this sort of internet marketing thing where you list out everything that's in the offer, you list out what the values are, and then you show the total value of the product that you're selling, and then you show the price. And so people were really stuck on this, and part of it probably had to do with the fact that I didn't explain it well. That was a big realization. I was like, I could have explained this better. But I had them fill out a spreadsheet with all of the modules and the bonuses, and the goal was that the spreadsheet was going to tally the total value, and then it was going to tell you a suggested price. And what that suggested price is actually what I should have named the customer expectation price. So I'm making a judgment call based on experience that if you sell something with a value of $10,000, the customer is going to expect that it's going to cost about $1,000. I am doing that based on, like I said, being in the market a long time. I did tell them that you probably now in 2025, because the market has evolved a little bit, you probably could say, okay, total value 10,000, the customer is going to expect it to be 5,000, right? So you can tell I'm dividing by 10 or dividing by 5, right? So there is some sort of judgment there. So the spreadsheet will give you the total value, and then it will tell you what the customer is expecting the price to be. And so your price needs to be under that. And many people didn't realize this when they did it. They filled in the sheet, and then the suggested price popped out, whatever the suggested price was, and then they put their regular prices more. And I said, well, you can't do that. The customer is expecting it to be this much, and you're telling me it's going to be double that? That's not going to create a conversion, right? And so the most common response I got was, well, but I'm already selling it for that. And so they were feeling conflicted because well, this program has already been selling for $3,000. You're telling me it's only the customer's going to expect $2,000. What am I supposed to do? Well, there's a couple things you can do here. Number one, recognize that this is the training and the coaching that I'm giving folks is I'm trying to help it so that you can sell this to cold traffic, right? So many people, when they say it's already selling, it's selling to warm traffic. It's selling to people that are word of mouth referrals. It's selling to people who know, like, and trust you. When you sell to cold traffic, you have to be much more ruthless with yourself. And so that could be one reason. But the second reason might be that your stack, if you're telling me that it sells really well at $3,000, then there's something wrong with the way that you positioned your stack, and you need to change that, because when you pitch to cold traffic, you need to command a value that's actually $6,000 or $30,000 or whatever the math you want to use, right? And so that was a big thing that got people really, really stuck. So those were overall the big issues. I did not focus a lot on the logo and the name. Kathy was the coach who was doing a lot of logo and name assessment. And overall, when we teach these offers, we say that the brief is really important, the stack is really important, and the name is really important. And so if you have never, taken any training with Kathy on offer names, I recommend you go to offerbrand.com, because that course is actually teaching the offer brief and the offer name, basically what is phase 1 of Launch Gorgeous. So you can go to offerbrand.com and get that. But it was an amazing 2 weeks. I learned a ton, even though I've done it a million times. I still keep learning more and more. And I appreciate all of the clients and the students who came along for the ride. So that is where I've been this week. I'll talk to you soon. And there you have it, folks. Another dose of $1 Million Grit. I hope today's episode has left you feeling inspired, equipped, and ready to face your own entrepreneurial journey with resolve. Remember, until next time, embrace the struggle, harness your grit, and keep pushing forward. You're stronger than any challenge you face. I'm Julie, and this has been $1 Million Grit.